There's something within you far more potent than any words, more captivating than any performance, more magnetic than any pickup technique. It's an energy people sense before you even open your mouth. A presence that fills the room the moment you walk in. A silent force that draws others towards you without you having to do a single thing. But here's the truth: few understand this aura, this natural magnetism some men possess, and others seem to have lost forever, isn't some mystical gift reserved for the chosen few. It's the direct result of how you handle the most primal and powerful force within you, your sexual energy. The question that should be burning in your mind right now is this: how many times a day are you literally flushing down the drain this energy that could be building your empire, forging your presence, creating your magnetic aura? How many times do you choose momentary gratification over self-building? Because, my friend, every time you give in to the easy impulse, you're not just losing a few minutes of your day, you're dissipating the very essence of what makes you a magnetic man. Napoleon Hill, in his seminal work, Think and Grow Rich, dedicated an entire chapter to what he called the mystery of sexual transmutation, not because he was obsessed with sex, but because he recognized something modern society has chosen to forget: that sexual energy is the most potent creative force in the human universe. Hill observed the history's great geniuses, men like Napoleon Bonaparte, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Henry Ford, and discovered a revealing pattern. They all possessed what he called personal magnetism, an unmistakable aura that attracted other men to follow them and women to admire them. And all of them, without exception, had learned to channel and transmute their sexual energy into creative achievement. But we live in an era that teaches us the exact opposite. Modern society has turned sexual gratification to a commodity, an escape valve, an inalienable right. We've been conditioned to believe that repressing our sexuality is neurosis, that not satisfying our impulses is detrimental to mental health, that masturbation is natural and necessary. And so, generation after generation of men have grown up believing that giving in to impulses is a sign of health, when in reality it's the most direct path to energetic mediocrity. Observe a man after he masturbates. Look into his eyes. There's an emptiness that wasn't there before, a loss of a sparkle, a subtle but perceptible decrease in his presence. He may not consciously realize it, but his body knows, his energy knows, and more importantly, everyone around him knows too, even if they can't explain why. It's as if something has been drained from his energy field, leaving him less present, less magnetic, less masculine. This isn't religious moralism or sexual repression. It's pure observation of the energetic dynamics that govern masculine presence. When you retain your sexual energy, when you consciously choose not to disperse it through easy gratification, something extraordinary begins to happen within you. That energy doesn't simply disappear, it accumulates, concentrates, transmutes into other forms of personal power. Think of sexual energy as fire. When you constantly dissipate it through masturbation, it's like throwing that fire away, wasting your vital fuel. But when you retain it, when you learn to contain it without repressing it, that fire begins to burn within you differently. It becomes fuel for your ambition, intensity for your presence, magnetism for your personality. You're not denying the fire, you're learning to use it to fuel a bigger furnace. The ancient alchemists spoke of transmuting lead into gold, but what they were really describing was this process, the transformation of raw sexual energy into refined spiritual and creative power. When you practice conscious retention, you're literally doing alchemy with your own vital energy. The primal impulse of immediate gratification transforms into discipline. Sexual urgency converts into mental focus. Carnal desire alchemizes into personal magnetism. And here's something you need to understand about the nature of this transformation. It doesn't just happen internally. The shift in your presence is something others feel physically. People begin to respond to you differently, even if they can't explain why. Women sense a subtle but powerful attraction towards you, an indefinable quality that makes them want to be near you. Men feel your presence more intensely, some feeling naturally inclined to follow you, others experiencing a slight competitiveness they can't explain. This isn't pseudoscience, it's the recognition of something our ancestors understood intuitively. In all the spiritual traditions of the world, across different cultures and eras, we find the same perception that sexual energy, when conserved and transmuted, becomes spiritual power. Celibate monks didn't avoid sex out of hatred for pleasure, but because they discovered that retaining this energy connected them to higher states of consciousness. Samurai warriors practiced sexual conservation not out of Puritanism, but because they knew it increased their strength, courage, and presence on the battlefield. But let me be clear about something fundamental: retention is not repression. Repressing your sexual energy is like trying to hold back a fire hose by bending it in half. The pressure builds until it explodes destructively. Conscious retention is like installing a turbine on that hose. You use the force of the water to generate power. The difference lies in consciousness and intention. When you repress your sexuality, you create neurosis, anxiety, obsession. When you consciously retain your sexual energy, you cultivate discipline, focus, and magnetism. Repression denies the energy's existence. Retention acknowledges its presence and chooses to direct it towards higher purposes. This is where we enter the territory of the psychological shadow. Carl Jung taught us that what we deny or repress becomes our shadow, the part of ourselves we project onto the world, and that unconsciously controls us. For many men, sexuality has become a shadow. They either deny it completely, living in a form of neurotic celibacy, or compulsively indulge in it, becoming slaves to their impulses. The path of sexual transmutation requires you to confront your sexual shadow directly. This means acknowledging your compulsive patterns without judgment, but also without indulgence. It means observing how you use masturbation as an escape from anxiety, boredom, loneliness, fear. It means understanding that all sexual compulsion is, at its core, an attempt to fill an emotional or spiritual void. How many times do you resort to masturbation not out of genuine desire, but as a way to avoid facing a difficult challenge? How many times do you use orgasm as a drug to escape uncomfortable emotions? How many times has sexual gratification become your way of procrastinating, of avoiding the real work of building your life? When you begin to observe these patterns with brutal honesty, something interesting happens. You realize you're not just dealing with sexual impulses. You're dealing with deep patterns of avoidance and self-sabotage. Compulsive masturbation is often a symptom of something much deeper: the inability to tolerate discomfort, the need for immediate gratification, the fear of confronting your own greatness. Because here's a truth that can be hard to accept: many men are unconsciously addicted to mediocrity. They consistently sabotage their own possibilities for greatness, because greatness requires them to become someone they've never been before. And that transformation is uncomfortable, scary, demanding. It's far easier to remain in the comfort zone of immediate gratification than to face the challenge of becoming extraordinary. Sexual retention forces you to confront this fear of greatness. When you can no longer resort to easy relief, when you can no longer use orgasm as an escape, you are forced to sit with your discomfort, your anxiety, your unresolved energy, and it's in that discomfort that the real alchemy happens. In the early days of retention, you mainly feel the absence of familiar relief, the absence of the habitual escape. Your mind may be restless, your body may be fidgety. This is normal, and it's exactly where most men give up. They interpret this discomfort as a sign that something is wrong, when in fact it's a sign that something is finally starting to get right. Because after this initial phase of discomfort, something extraordinary begins to emerge. First, you notice a subtle increase in your energy levels. You wake up more easily, feel more alert during the day, need fewer stimulants to stay focused. Your mind becomes clearer, your thoughts more organized, your decisions faster and more precise. But these are only the most superficial changes. The deeper transformations happen at more subtle levels. Your voice naturally gains more authority without you having to force it. Your gaze becomes more penetrating, more present. Your posture improves automatically, as if something within you is straightening itself up. You'll notice you can hold eye contact longer, that your presence in conversations becomes more magnetic. People begin to react to you differently. Strangers make more eye contact on the street. People in meetings pay more attention when you speak. Women show interest in more subtle but noticeable ways. Men show more respect, some automatically positioning themselves as followers in group situations. And here's where many men make a fundamental mistake. They begin to interpret these changes as signs that they are now sexually irresistible, that they can now get any woman. They break their retention prematurely, seeking external sexual validation, and lose all the power they had accumulated. If you are feeling the real value of what I'm sharing here, if you recognize that these are not just words, but the description of a genuine transformative journey that could fundamentally change who you are and how the world responds to you, then I need to ask something. Subscribe to this channel now and turn on notifications. Because what I'm revealing here is not knowledge you find anywhere. These are secrets that powerful men throughout history have discovered through their own experience, but that our modern society has deliberately obscured. If you want access to more content that can literally rebuild your masculine presence from scratch, your subscription ensures you don't miss any piece of this puzzle. Because real transformation requires real knowledge, and real knowledge is exactly what you'll find here. The true power of retention isn't in the ability to attract women. That's just a side effect. The true power lies in the fundamental transformation of who you are as a man. It's in the ability to become the master of your impulses instead of their slave. It's in the development of a genuine presence that emanates from real inner strength, not from seduction techniques or rehearsed performances. When you practice retention for extended periods, and I'm talking weeks or months, not days, something even deeper happens. You begin to access levels of creativity you never knew you possessed. Projects that once seemed impossible become exciting challenges. Problems that used to drain your energy become intriguing puzzles you want to solve. Your work capacity increases dramatically, but more importantly, the quality of your work improves tangibly. Napoleon Hill observed that history's great geniuses often produced their masterpieces during periods of intense sexual energy that was transmuted into creativity. They didn't deny their sexual nature. They channeled it. They used the intensity of desire as fuel for creative intensity. The same energy that could have been wasted in momentary gratification was invested in creating something lasting and significant. But here's the deeper aspect of sexual transmutation. It's not just about semen retention or avoiding orgasms. It's about learning to consciously work with the most fundamental life force within you. It's about recognizing that all creation, all manifestation, every act of bringing something new into the world is, at its core, a sexual act, not in the literal sense, but in the energetic sense. When you build a business, you're making love to reality. When you write a book, you're impregnating the world with your ideas. When you build something significant, you're using the same creative energy that generates biological life, but directing it to generate life in other forms. And here we find one of the deepest aspects of masculinity. The man who truly understands and masters his sexual energy isn't the one who denies it, but the one who consciously uses it. He recognizes that holding this energy within him, without casually dispersing it, connects him to a source of power that transcends the physical. Think of the great leaders you admire, the men who possess that indefinable magnetic quality that makes others want to follow them. They have something in common, a controlled intensity, a transmuted sexual energy that manifests as charisma, natural authority, magnetic presence. They aren't necessarily the most handsome or tallest or richest men, but they possess something far more powerful than any physical or material attribute. They possess self-mastery, and there's no more fundamental, more transformative, more powerful mastery than mastery over one's own sexual energy. When you develop this mastery, when you learn to consciously retain and transmute your sexual energy, you're not just changing your habits, you're literally rebuilding your masculine identity from the ground up. You're moving from a reactive, impulsive masculinity, governed by external needs, to a creative, disciplined masculinity, radiating inner power. And people feel it. They feel it in the way you walk into a room. They feel it in the quality of your attention when you speak to them. They feel it in the groundedness of your presence, the controlled intensity of your gaze, the natural authority of your voice. They may not be able to explain what's different about you, but they know something is. This is what the ancients called an aura, not some mystical energy field, but the perceptible manifestation of transmuted sexual energy. It's real, it's tangibly, and it's something you can consciously develop through the disciplined practice of retention. But let me caution you about something. This path isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the most difficult challenges a man can face in modern life. Because you're not just fighting against your own impulses, you're fighting against decades of societal conditioning, against an entire industry built to keep you addicted to instant gratification, against a culture that ridicules sexual discipline as neurotic repression. You will face resistance not only from yourself, but from others. Friends will mock your weird face. Partners may interpret your choice as rejection. Society itself will whisper that you're being extreme, neurotic, unnecessary. And in moments of weakness, you may start to believe those voices. It's in those moments that you need to remember why you started this journey. It wasn't to impress anyone or follow some trend. It was because you recognized that there was more to you than was being expressed, that your vital energy was being wasted when it could be invested, that your masculine presence was being diluted when it could be concentrated. Sexual retention isn't an end in itself. It's a means. It's a practice that cultivates deeper qualities, discipline, self-control, body awareness, energetic mastery. These qualities spill over into every other area of your life. The man who can consciously master his sexual impulses discovers he can master other impulses as well. The tendency to procrastinate, the habit of complaining, the compulsion to seek external validation. And here's where the real magic happens: when you stop leaking your energy through compulsive sexual gratification. That energy becomes available to be invested in your real goals, your genuine dreams, your vision of who you can become. You discover reserves of strength, focus, and determination you didn't know you possessed. Your ability to work for extended periods increases dramatically. Projects that don't seem overwhelming become stimulating challenges. Your tolerance for discomfort and frustration grows exponentially. You develop what might be called existential resilience, the ability to persevere in the face of obstacles that would make other men give up. But perhaps more important than all of this is what happens to your relationship with yourself. When you prove to yourself that you can master the most primal and powerful impulse within you, something fundamental shifts in your self-perception. You're no longer someone who can't help doing certain things. You're no longer a victim of your own impulses. You become aware that you have choice, control, power over your own experience. This sense of personal mastery radiates outward and affects how others perceive you. They sense that you're someone who has control over himself, someone who can be trusted, someone who possesses the discipline necessary to meet commitments and achieve goals. That perception naturally makes them want to associate with you, follow your lead, seek your approval. So, we arrive at the central paradox of sexual retention. The less you need external sexual validation, the more sexually attractive you become. The less desperate you are for female attention, the more women naturally gravitate towards you. The less you depend on others to feel powerful, the more genuine power you radiate. This isn't manipulation or technique. It's a natural consequence of developing an authentic masculine presence. When you're not constantly leaking your sexual energy, when you've learned to retain and transmute that force, you develop what can only be described as natural magnetism. People are drawn into your orbit not because you're trying to attract them, but because you've become genuinely magnetic. But here's the deepest realization of all: the journey of sexual retention is fundamentally a spiritual journey. When you learn to consciously work with your sexual energy, you're learning to work with the very force that creates and sustains life. You're connecting with aspects of your nature that transcend the physical and touch the sacred. Great mystics of all traditions recognized this. They knew that sexual energy, when conserved and consciously elevated, becomes spiritual energy, not in the sense of denying the body, but in the sense of using the body as a vehicle for transcendence. When you practice retention for extended periods, you may begin to experience states of consciousness that are difficult to describe to those who've never experienced them. A feeling of connection to something larger than yourself, an expanded awareness of your own presence and power, a sharpened intuition about people and situations, a creativity that seems to come from an inexhaustible source. These aren't mystical side effects. They're natural developments that emerge when you stop dispersing your vital energy and learn to consciously focus and elevate it. And this is where we arrive at the ultimate truth about the masculine aura. It's not something you can fake, buy, or learn through superficial techniques. It's something that emerges naturally when you become the master of your own vital energy, when you develop real discipline over your most basic impulses, when you learn to transmute your sexual force into creative and spiritual power. The man who masters his sexual energy doesn't need to prove his masculinity to anyone because it emanates from him naturally. He doesn't need to desperately compete for female attention because his magnetic presence naturally attracts what's genuinely compatible with him. He doesn't need to use manipulative techniques or persuasion because his authenticity and personal power make others naturally want to align with his vision. This is the aura everyone senses but few understand. It's the result of transmuted sexual energy, conscious discipline, and genuine personal mastery. It's what separates genuinely powerful men from men who only pretend to be powerful. It's what makes the difference between authentic masculinity and a masculine performance. If you recognize the truth in what's been revealed here, if you feel the call to begin your own journey of transmutation, then know that the first step is always the hardest and the most important. It's the decision to stop wasting your most precious vital force and begin consciously investing it in building who you can become. It won't be easy. There will be moments of intense temptation, moments when you question if it's worth it, moments when the voice of mediocrity will whisper that you should give up. But if you persist, if you genuinely commit to this practice, you will discover you possessed reservoirs of strength, power, and magnetism you never knew existed. You will discover that the energy you were casually wasting was, in fact, the raw material of your greatness. That the force you were unconsciously leaking was precisely what you needed to become the man you always knew you could be. And when that happens, when you feel your own aura intensifying, your presence becoming magnetic, your personal power expanding, you will understand that you haven't just changed a few habits. You've fundamentally transformed. You've become someone who masters their energy instead of being mastered by it. Someone who radiates authentic power instead of faking strength. Someone whose presence others instinctively feel and respect. That's the masculine aura everyone senses. And now you know how to create it